Welcome to Between Data and Risk podcast. Today we'll talk about problem-focused startup development and digitalization of agro-industry with our guest, Allan Gray, Head of Digital Innovation and Agri-Food Systems Lab at Purdue Applied Research Institute and Executive Director at Purdue DIAL Ventures. Stay tuned. If you're a business owner or senior manager, you probably had more than enough about all the wonderful opportunities awaiting you in the era of digitalization.
Whether it is big data, cloud, data science, or whatever buzzword is currently trendy.
If you would like to hear someone dissecting these claims and showing you what it actually takes to improve business processes, you're in the right place.
This is Between Data and Risk, where we discuss real-life examples of what works and what doesn't in the world of business operations.
Hi, I'm your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian, and with me is my co-host, Artur Guya, Cognition Shared Solutions Chief Risk and Strategy Officer.
Hello.
Welcome to this episode of Between Data and Risk. Today, we'll take a look at innovation in the agri-food industry. We have with us Allan Gray, Head of Digital Innovation at Agri-Food Systems Labs at Purdue Applied Research Institute and Executive Director at Purdue DIAL Ventures, who agreed to share some of his experiences with us. Hello, Allan.
Hi. Good to see you both.
Yes, we are really excited to have you with us. We know that you run DIAL Ventures, but before we will dig into it, I think we should start explaining our audience what's specific about innovation in agri-food industry. Like, does it need innovation, and in what capacity? Like, we all use agri-food industry if we eat, and I believe most of our listeners do from time to time. So, what's the business side of the
Yeah, really good question to start with. I think the thing that I think about the agri-food industry, of course, a lot of what I will say here is based on my experiences relative to, say, North American and South American agriculture and food, where I have most of my expertise. Some in Europe. The developing world will see a bit different frame of reference for that. We might address some of that as we move forward here, but what I would tell you is that first and foremost, I think that it's important for our audiences to understand that agriculture, the food and agricultural industry, is probably the best kept secret with respect to the world's first and most successful sustainable industry. We are really quite good at producing the world's food, using the limited set of resources, right? And over the last 50 years, we have gone from one farmer can feed roughly 40 people to one farmer now feeds 140 people. While we've done that, we've also reduced the amount of inputs that we use in the process of doing that. That's the very definition of sustainability. It's the greatest sustainability story in the history of the world, in my judgment. So when I say that, you asked, Marian, does agriculture need innovation? Well, I want to start by telling you that it's actually a way more innovative industry than most people give it credit for. It's actually quite innovative on its own. So why do you need a DIAL Ventures if you already have an industry that's already quite innovative, right? In the United States, we're very fortunate that food as an expenditure for the average person in our population is less than 10%. Right? That's pretty amazing. It's not the same way everywhere else in the world. Certainly, Europe enjoys something similar with respect to cost, and in other parts of the world, the costs are still higher. But it's not the cost of the food; it's actually the income levels not being as high that's really the differentiator. Cost of food is continually coming down overall. Inflation in the last few years notwithstanding, we've seen a little bit of an increase in food, but if you look at it over a long period of time, clearly food costs have come way. So this is what I say to folks when they ask me about innovation in agriculture. So we're very innovative, we're very good, but we're a very physical industry. What do I mean by that? You take physical raw materials, and we turn them into alternative physical raw materials that humans can utilize: food, fiber, fuel, primarily. Right. Those are, and we're very good, innovative in physical side of things. But where are we lagging so dramatically is digitally. We have the worst digital footprint in the United States, for example. We're ranked 22nd out of 22 industries with respect to our digital footprint of agriculture. 22nd out of 22.
How is it measured? How is this digital? Because to my understanding, when your job is to get on the tractor and plow the field, your digital footprint might be low, and you can still do your job well. So how is it measured, and why? Is it comparable? I don't know, to fintech.
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer would be yes and no. It is compared in the 22 to 22 out of 22 compared to fintech. We're 22nd out of 22, and fintech would be number one because it's purely digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where do we think about digital? Our ability to share data and information across the system, we're abysmal at it. Our ability to use data and information to optimize processes, we're abysmal at it, right? Our ability to visualize activities as they're occurring. We're, for example, animal behaviors. We're getting better, but we're far behind. And our ability to do all of the things that you would consider to be digital frameworks, we're far behind on. Now, the question really should be, why are we so far behind? And the answer, I believe, lies in this very thing. I can run a tractor just fine without it, reasonably well. And so at an individual level, I'm not sure I need that much digital. What I need is to take physical stuff and turn it into better physical stuff, and hopefully feed more people and be more profitable than I was the year before, right? More productive and more profitable than I was the year before. So at an individual level, it becomes harder to think about digital because it's not core to what you do, which is exactly what you were suggesting, Marian, was that, I can drive a tractor without this. Exactly. It's not core. What I find in any industry you look at is if it's not the core of what you do, you're actually probably not very good at innovating. And digital is not the core of agriculture. So our ability to innovate in the digital side has just been not good, not because it's not core. Does that make sense? That's the reason why.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. But I'm trying to see the conversation. As you mentioned, you cannot, share the results between regions or between systems. The question is, what are the benefits that are, let's say, not there because of this delay in innovation and implementation?
Yeah, so I think it could take us all day, I suppose, to answer all the questions of what's missing because we can't do that. Is a big question, really. But let me give you some big picture areas where I think we're missing. So trust in the food system is really lacking. Why is trust in the food system lacking? That's a digital footprint, right? That's ability to share across the system what's happening to the land, what's happening to the food, what's happening to the processing, what's happening to is fresh produce being shipped in containers that air conditioners break on, and it's at bad temperatures during certain times, right? But we don't know that. You can't track or trace that. That truck driver knows if he was broken down, but nobody else does, right?
Is this tracking the supply chain, or is this more about the quality of the food?
It's about tracking the supply chain so that I understand what's happening to the quality of the food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's both, right? It's both of those things. So that's an area where, boy, if we could do a better job digitally, we'd create more trust in the food system amongst our consumers. And now the misinformation that may have people buying foods for reasons that aren't really true, but make them feel better about it for whatever reason that they're buying, maybe we can shift that. And it looks better for the overall business. They're doing a better job of creating trust, and there's more opportunity for you to be able to do that. So that's one area. It's the trust area. The second area is the sub-optimization that occurs in the system. Mm-hmm. If all you know is what happens within your firm, I can optimize my firm, but that might not be optimal across the system because there could be a global optimum. that even includes for me a higher level optimization for my own firm, but because the firm after me or the firm before me doesn't optimize at the same, it only does a local optimization, we can't both get to the global optimization, right? And we believe that happens in a number of different places. For example, in the cattle industry in the United States, beef. Right. There is zero connection right now between the quality of the beef that is being sold at a white tablecloth restaurant and the cow that was used to raise that beef. There's zero connection between the two. If you have the digital connection between the two and the information is being shared between the quality at the restaurant table and the genetics that are happening in the beef in the back, what could you do to optimize the overall system so that the consumer is happier? They're getting better quality, and the producer is happier because they're producing a better quality product that's getting a higher price for what they're delivering. Right now, that information system is just doesn't.
I'm really curious because it's like, they say that the tide raises all the ships. Can you give us the example of, let's say we have farms 1, 2, 3. You're driving, you're passing the first one, the second one, the third one. When these suboptimal solutions interfere with each other, from my perspective, I'm not an expert, as you probably noticed. Okay, somebody's doing something to his field, and as long as he's not using, I don't know, some terrible chemicals which flow with the underground water to other fields, they are pretty disconnected. Can you give us an example? Because I love the interconnected systems. That's my passion. So if you would explain to us on the example how these can connect, it would be absolutely interesting to me.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question in the sense that we want to think about connections, about whether we're talking about horizontal connections or vertical connections, right? Most often I tend to think about the vertical connections of, okay, what can I do with the food that I produce on the land that I have? And where does that go next in the channel? Does it go directly to the consumer? Does it go through a handler? Right. So I like to think about that vertical piece, but it's an interesting thing to think about what could happen if you had more connectivity across the horizontal piece of it. So if you'll allow me, I'll try to address both of those. Let me start with the with the vertical set of the optimization. So a lot of people think today, well, the best way to do agriculture, value added, and trust with the consumer and all that is direct to the consumer. It should go from the farm directly to the consumer. That's a grand idea. It's not a very smart one. It's not a very smart one, but it's a grand idea. Why is it not a very smart one? Because you have to aggregate enough quantity to make the system efficient enough so that the food is not so expensive. I can raise tomatoes, and I do a great job of raising tomatoes in my garden behind my house. Those tomatoes cost me about $3.50 a tomato. And I can buy them in the grocery store for 35 cents, right? I'm not efficient and effective at doing it. So you need this aggregation that has to happen across the value chain if you're going to feed billions of people. Farmers markets are great. I have no problem with farmers markets. I love the idea. I buy from farmers markets. No, you're not feeding the world from farmers markets. It's just not practical, right? So you need these vertical connections to make the market system work to effectively feed people. And the more that we can connect the data then between the various parties within that vertical system, the more efficient and effective we'll be at being able to. Now, let's talk about this horizontal side. Go ahead.
I just wanted to drop an example. It's one of the business cases that we show to people. We actually helped with vertical integration of the pet food company. They were actually making pet food from some kangaroo meat, and we understand how much more efficient it is when you have control, visibility, and interconnectedness of the processes. So we can confirm from, let's say, our limited experience that it really works great if you can vertically integrate. Artur, you seem like you have a question.
Yes, I've been waiting for the opportunity. I'm just wondering because there's we're talking we've been talking for the last 10 minutes or so about the needs for innovation, but it seems like this whole discussion is lacking from the broader media space, right? There's a lot of talking about innovation in computing, in robotics, in finance, but somehow the kind of humble carrot in a supermarket is not getting any attention from innovation. So is it because, and I may be kind of dumbing down the population here, although usually it's very hard, but is it because most people just simply assume that food grows in Tesco's and it magically happens to appear there, and most people are completely unaware of the whole complexity of what actually needs to happen for them to receive a salad or a hamburger? How would we change this? What needs to happen for people actually be more aware of this complexity and this need for innovation here?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one we've been talking a bit about in DIAL Ventures as well. Here's the interesting thing, Artur. You're really correct in the sense that the consumer is ignorant, and that's not negative, right? Ignorant means I don't know. It doesn't mean you're not capable of learning. It means you don't know. The other thing that we discover about consumers by and large is they also don't care. So if you don't know and you don't care, then we're not going to educate you, right? And this has been a problem of our industry for a long time, is if we just educate the consumer, it's not a very good marketing ploy, but right, because they're ignorant and they don't care. So by and large, a person goes to the grocery store, they're not interested in researching everything on the shelf before they buy it. Why? Because I'm trying to get into the grocery store, buy some groceries, get home, cook them, and eat them, not go in and research so that I find the latest. So when I talk about digitization and transparency, as we talk about it across the industry, it's not for the consumer per se, because they don't care until they do. So it's really more about our ability, when they do decide they care, we have the ability to say, here it is, you can see it when you decide you care. So what does that mean to me? It's not about the consumer, it's about the brands, right? It's about food brands. Hey, if I'm McDonald's, my brand is worth a ton of money if that consumer decides they care. If I can't show them, here's how that broiler was raised that created that chicken nugget that's not very good for you, but since you want to know how it was raised, I better be able to show it to you. Right? That's the point. And that's why this is interesting to me, is because it does become a business activity. It's not necessarily about the consumer, although I want healthier, cheaper, more affordable, more available food for everybody. And I think we can do that through digitization of this system. That will also occur, but it's also a business proposition. It's like, look, your brand, you want trust with your consumers. Brands are what create trust if that brand is trustable. Well, my concern is I better protect that trust so I need to know. And if I'm McDonald's and I'm sourcing, billions of pounds of beef, how am I going to know where that came from and how that came through the system if it's all paperwork oriented and it gets broken? That chain of information gets broken at various levels. So we need to make sure that we put all that together. So that's a long answer for you, Artur, to say, listen, the consumer is ignorant and they don't care. It's not about them. It's ultimately about the brands and the ability of the food system to create trust amongst consumer writ large.
You have an uphill struggle here, because actually you mentioned McDonald's. McDonald's did an ad campaign here in UK some time ago, advertising that all their hamburgers sold in the UK are actually from British beef, and most of the public went, yeah, right. And they could prove it, but the public didn't care. The public just didn't believe them. But I'm just wondering, because you're talking a lot about trust, but that's kind of innovation, increasing digitization for one purpose. Do I understand also correctly that innovation can be used to increase? You mentioned 40 increase to 140 people per farmer. Can innovation also help us increase this to, I don't know, 340?
Yeah.
So if I could drop in here, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, but the question is it really a topic? Is it really about the innovation? It is about the scale. you are increasing the scale of things. So you have bigger tractor, and one guy can, drive it. To my understanding, especially in the US, the sizes of farms are humongous, especially compared to Europe. So I guess there is some innovation needed that this one guy on this tractor can actually, go 200 miles one direction and then 200 miles the other. But is it innovation, or is it just a different business model that the huge farms? It reminds me. Me and Artur, we've both been raised in the socialist country, unfortunately, and there were this country-owned farms where they were collected. It's a similar thing done with money, not with bayonets and carbines, but.
So is it per farmer or is it per hectare? I think what the data scientific
yes. Thank you. That's my question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and so I think there's a couple of things to keep in mind. Scale matters for sure. Production agriculture, because of the nature of what it is, and its resource base is so large that by definition it's high fixed cost business. When it's a fixed cost business, scale is what matters. And this has been a misnomer of the globe for a long time, right? It's one of the things that I have as a challenge. I don't want to go into this in too much detail, but the whole idea we got to save the smallholder farmer is just a terrible idea. Basically, all we're doing is saying, let's make sure we keep you in poverty for the rest of your life because you have a business model that will never work. But let's just make sure we give you enough money to keep you doing a business model that will never work. That doesn't make any sense. Just
to be clear, I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other. I'm just saying that there is a difference. And as Artur said, what I try to say and spend too much time trying to explain is like this innovation per hectare or the yield per hectare is probably just a tiny bit better because I understand, when I learned how much the tractor that I speak about so often costs. That's when I got my gray hair, when I realized that the Lamborghini is not primarily the brand for sports car, and the Lamborghini tractor is probably more expensive than most of the sports cars.
Yeah. Well, so what happens though there is because there's so much this fixed cost is scale, then it's actually not a scale issue. It turns out to be a productivity issue. Right, on the acres that I'm farming, how do I get as much out of that as I possibly can? Or on the animal farm that I'm getting, how do I get as much productivity from that animal, from the inputs that I'm using as I possibly can? And so where you start to think about this is, I think agriculture by and large is really good at this. I think Europe is really good at it. I think the US is really good at it. And in that case, scale's totally different, but we're still really good at the productivity. How do we get the best production out of the acres that we have? Okay. But our population is still growing. So we still got to feed even more people, despite the fact that I think we're actually really quite good at that right now. So now to get even better at it, we're not talking about one thing that we're going to do 100 times better, right? We're trying to find 100 things that we're going to do 1% better. Okay, you're not doing that from physical, let me share my knowledge tribally with the next people. You're going to have to do that with data, with analytics, with very precise ways in which you're trying to get 100 things to improve 1%. That's what you have to do in order to get to that productivity level of the future. So that's where digital comes into play with respect to saying it's going to drive productivity because it almost has to. We don't have big boulders to turn over anymore in productivity. It's all little tiny pebbles. And how do you find enough of those to get the real benefits you're going to need to feed 9.5 billion people when today we're only feeding 8 billion. I mean, that's a lot, but we got 1.5 billion more or 2 billion more, maybe, depending on which numbers you believe, that we're going to have to feed. But, well, we don't have one planet. We're not creating more land, so we're going to have to do something to be more effective and efficient in ways in which we do that. Then there's another piece of this puzzle where digital, I think, can play. And let me tell you a quick story on this. In the United States, in the apple production region, it depends a bit on the year, both weather and markets. But by and large, 30 to 35% of the apples never get harvested.
They just rot.
Just rot. Labor was too expensive. The apple didn't meet the quality standards that the system wants for the quality of that whole apple. And then the cost associated with then pulling that apple into a processing plant is too expensive, or more often than not, the markets don't recognize that they don't recognize, wait, here's where the apples are oversupplied or falling off the tree, and there's a system for collecting those. Okay. Mm-hmm. How do we create digital systems to allow that market to be better clearing than it is? There's no reason 35% of the apples in the United States be sitting on the ground. We should feed people with them. Well, okay, how can we do that? How can we create opportunities, marketplaces where those things begin to clear in a different way? The farmer gets some benefit from it because now there's a market to sell these apples that won't sell into their normal markets, but there's also now access for other companies to add value to a set of apples that don't have as much value today coming off the tree. So that's another area where I think food waste, right, is a big problem. And digital can help us find markets and ways to get that food waste into the marketplace to allow us to feed more people than we currently are. And again, another solution then for how do we feed 10 billion people?
So I can think of kind of two more areas where food innovation probably is worth looking into. One of that is the decreasing of waste from actually what you call the raw product into the processed product, because you probably can extract more. And the other one is related to my area, risk management, and that's probably ensuring the safety of the food. But can you explain to us how DIAL Ventures actually helps, well, if not solve, then at least approach these problems such that at some point, because we are, as you say, not getting more land, we are getting definitely more people. There's going to be sustainability problems. So how do you help companies approach this?
Yeah. So just a brief overview of DIAL Ventures. DIAL Ventures is a startup studio. That's what we do. We create startup companies to help digitize the ag and food system for the reasons that we just explained. So how do we help? We help by creating startup companies to do these sorts of things in various areas in the industry. But the most important part of what we do in the startup studio is that we start from the premise that we don't know the exact problem or the solution that we should create. What we know is that we have strong connections to the industry, and we can bring talent and the industry knowledge together to co-create problem identification that leads to a set of solutions that can be adopted, applied, and have an impact. That in a nutshell, that's what we ultimately are trying to do in our startup studio. Say, university is not going to sit here at a bench doing research and find the solution to a specific problem. We do that, but often what we do at the university level is so technical and it's just not ready for commercialization. So you don't see what you see happening at the university often is something that will be adopted 10 years from now when somebody figures out how to get something that'll be commercializable out of it. We're trying to take a little bit different approach within our university studio and say, let's start from the industry. What are their challenges today? And how can we come up with solutions to help them in that digital world create solutions for today? And Artur, what I'd tell you is that some people will call us boring. Why? Because because the things the industry needs to be better at being digitized are not cutting edge technologies. We're taking common off-the-shelf tech stacks, putting them together in ways that people can adopt and utilize today just to get us to a level where physical is turning into digital data. If we don't, we have to solve that problem first, right? We're not going to create the next Chat GPT for tomato production tomorrow because we don't have the data to do that. That doesn't exist, right? AI needs a tremendous amount of library of data. We don't have it.
This data doesn't grow on trees, so to speak.
No, that's right. Yeah, but actually, the funny thing is, Marian, that's really funny.
Does.
Actually, I'm going to write that down because I might need to use that because here's the funny thing about it. It doesn't grow on trees yet. It does. It does grow on trees, but we don't know how to capture the data that's growing on that tree. That's the challenge. Is we're still trying to figure out how do you capture the data that's growing on that apple tree. That's what we really need to be able to do better than we can do today.
The funny thing is that what you described is actually, you described our company as well. It's something that we truly believe in, is that you need to go into the client and see what are the processes and how we can use data and risk to make them better. It's not about. Often clients ask us about silver bullets, like, oh, do you have a technology that would just come here, do poof, and the world will be, fluffy and profitable? And no, there is not. It's hard work. So I think we both are boring as well. So yeah, let's. But on the other hand, there is a really interesting story, because we had one episode some time ago with a gentleman who was Mandar Joshi. He was running the biggest, I think, startup venture in India, and they were also working by connecting startups with businesses. So the idea is tested before being fully developed. So if I can,
they call it the integrated incubator.
So the idea in India, it worked beautifully. They now moved to Dubai, and they will be doing the similar thing. So we think that this is the only way that can help solve real problems. Maybe you won't have, I don't know, unicorns this year, but it's we would love to hear more. Like, I don't know how often people meet you, because on the other hand, you have these people who need to do this physical work to transform physical into physical, and sitting and chatting around, I guess it's not their best pastime. So how does it really work?
Yeah, it's good. So the way that we try to do it at the big picture level, first thing we try to do is that we're going to combine what we find as the three most important ingredients to create an advantage startup. Our job in the end is to create an advantage startup. What is an advantage startup? It's a startup that has a very clear understanding of the problem, a very clear line of sight to who its customers are, a very solid go-to-market plan, and an ability to start generating revenue quickly. Okay, and to do that, and so that it moves to an exit. All right, for us, our final measure of success is that we create a startup company that within 5 to 7 years, it exits into the ag and food industry by strategic, usually buying them. Perhaps they go public, but usually not. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get companies to buy them at the point where they're mature enough. Right, that's our measure of success, is do we get to an exit? That's what we call an advantage startup. They have an advantage of getting to an exit. It takes 3 pieces. Talent. So you got to de-risk the talent. You have to have a great idea. You have to de-risk the idea, and you have to have strategic capital. If you take talent, great ideas, and the right kind of money, you can bake the cake that creates the advantage startup. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the recipe that we use. How does our recipe work? First, starts with the talent. We're going to go and recruit fellows from industry, large, not ag, maybe, not food, maybe. If we find some talent in ag or food, that's fine, but it's not a prerequisite. You don't have to come from the industry. In fact, for each 6 months, when we bring in 6 new fellows, we don't want the majority of them to be ag and food. We want the majority of them to not be. So what do we want them to be? Technology background, entrepreneur background, having been in this startup world before, know how risky this can be prepared to be a part of that sort of ecosystem of startups. Mm-hmm. That's a different kind of breed of people. It's not a professor, by the way. They're a different kind of people, right? So you start by getting those people. We the way we do it, we bring them in right away. When we first start engagement with the industry for a 6-month cycle, our fellows are with us on day 1, right? And they're going to go through the discovery process with us. So what that means is a fellow doesn't come to us with an idea. In fact, we don't allow it. If they already have an idea for a startup they want to do for food and ag, we send them somewhere else. because we're an open innovation system. So the 6 fellows come in. The first thing we do is we start engaging with the industry. Yes, you're correct. Most of them are worried about physical stuff, but they will host us for 3-4 hours on a visit, show us what they do physically, and have a meeting with us to talk about, here's the challenges we have, where if we could just get a digital solution, it would help us. Right. So we're going to spend 2 weeks with our fellows driving around the United States, seeing these various companies, visiting with them, talking to them, putting our hands on things, having these interesting conversations around the challenges that they have, looking for themes, right? Because you can't create a startup to solve a company's problem. That's not a startup, right? But if you find a theme where you say, boy, that company, that, look at these companies, all have the same similar problem. Maybe there's an opportunity in this space. So we're gonna go through that process for 2 weeks. At the end of that 2 weeks, we spend 3 weeks on Zoom calls with various subject matter experts in the industry, faculty members, professors, consultants, people at companies, government entities, and we're on Zoom calls talking about issues, understanding better what issues are. At the end of that process, our fellows and our team are going to come up with about 50 different ideas or possibilities of opportunity. We're going to take those opportunities, fleshed out, what's the problem, who's the customer segment, what's the job they're trying to get done, no solution, just define the problem. We're going to bring together a group of industry people, usually about 65 people from across various parts of the industry. They're going to come together, and we have 12 of those 40 or 50 ideas. We've narrowed it down to 12. The 12 we think are the most interesting ones. And we're going to present those to this industry group in a physical setting where we're talked through each one of the 12 in detail in small groups. Each time a mix of industry people are providing input, saying that's a good problem, not a good problem, not a big enough problem. Well, that's the right customer segment. We'll have you talk to this customer group. Hey, I have some contacts. You should be talking to these people. Spend a day doing that. At the end of the day, those industry people then rank those 12 ideas down to 6. They say, here's the 6 best ideas you've got. The next day, we spend about a half a day with them, and we start the process saying, what might a solution look like? And then we're going to take those 6. We're going to spend about 3 weeks on solutions, getting feedback from customers, Zoom calling people, giving them ideas of what we're talking about. At the end of that 3 weeks, we're going to have our advisory council. It's going to take a look at these 6, all the feedback we've gotten, the concepts we've gotten, and they're going to say, these are the top 3. Now our 6 fellows have the top 3 ideas. We're going to spend about 6 weeks building out business models, getting more voice of customer, and ultimately getting potential customers to sign letters of intent that say, hey, we really like the solution you're coming up with. This is a real problem for us. We want to work with you. We would be willing to be your first customers and do a pilot test with you. And then at the end of that period, those 3 ideas that we have get pitched to our investment committee as potential startup companies. And then our investment committee decides which, if any of those, we'd want to invest in, right? So what I just walked you through was de-risking human talent, because our fellows are with us all along the way with the process and getting prepared to try to lead these companies. And we're de-risking the idea directly with the industry and the industry's input, so that when we get to that pitch of those 3 companies, we've got the best 3 ideas vetted with respect to business model that we can come up with, right? So, of course, you can't make anything unrisky, right? We still have to have a leap of faith. Hey, if we're going to invest in this company, we know that it's still highly uncertain. But for us, all the stage gates along the way to take us from 40 ideas to 12 ideas to 6 ideas to 3 ideas to 1 or 2 of these we might invest in, those are all part of the de-risking process to get that company to be the ones we invest in to be the ones that have the highest probability of being successful. That's how we do it.
Certainly looks like a very comprehensive process. Can you share with us some success stories that you've had?
Yeah, so I'm getting better and better at this. I talk about this like I'm an old seasoned veteran at doing this, and I am. We started in February of 2022, so whoa. I've had all of 1 year of running this program. In that 1 year, we ran the program twice. Right, we ran our first pilot in February of 22. That resulted in 2 companies that we pitched for in June of 22. We invested in one of those. That company is called Croft. That company is focused on digitizing the migrant labor process for farmers in the United States. Farmers in the United States, the only thing you can get out of them most of the time about what's the biggest challenge you have: labor, 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 labor. As you know, migrant labor in the U.S. is a tough thing. The border control, all this sort of stuff in the U.S. is a difficult government-run, managed process. It takes a lot of paperwork. This company's focus is, how do we help the farm employer make their job easier in managing this labor process with respect to migrant labor, and at the same time helping the migrant laborer on the other end make their process of getting through all the paperwork to allow them to come to the United States to work be easier, more seamless, more transparent, more easier to have communications between the parties, because it's not just the laborer and the employer. It's also the visa processor, the state government, the federal government. There's so many of these pieces of that puzzle. So that's the company we got the first time. Then we ran our first full studio, 6 fellows. That started in July of 2022. We presented 3 companies in November. 2 of those companies have been invested in. Those 2 I can't tell you the names of because they're still in stealth mode, but they've both been invested in. One of them has been incorporated now, and has its 2 co-founders in place and is moving ahead with customer interactions. And then the last one, we just hired the second co-founder. So what we usually do is we have a fellow that goes with our company, and then we hire an additional co-founder. Usually our fellow is going to be either a technical CTO type, or they're a business type, a CEO type, and then we're going to hire their counterpart to come in with them. I try to have a CEO and a CTO to start with, and then they build out the rest of the grouping, right? So our success stories: 1 year we ran this program twice, and in 1 year we were able to create 3 startup companies that our investment committee, which is the industry, said these are worthy of making the investment in, to see if the startups will flourish.
So it brings the question. There are 2 sides. There are some, let's say, with fellows. How do you get them? And is there an age limit? Can we join? And the industry that sponsors it or comes with ideas, and what do they get in return? So there are two topics which actually I think are pretty interesting. So how do you select your fellows, and how do you select or cooperate with the companies? Because let's say the startup is supposed to connect the 2, I guess.
Yeah, good question. So we have some magic, I think, that happens here with our director of entrepreneurial talent, Tim Dixon. You've met him and had a conversation with him. He's our primary recruiter of the talent. He has really good, strong connections into the tech industry, which helps pull in the technical side of people. I have a reputation in the industry, so I can help find some ag and food folks usually. But I wish I could tell you. What I can tell you is the outcomes. I'm not sure I can tell you what the inputs were to get us to the outcomes, right? Our outcomes are that we're getting about 150 people reaching out to Tim saying, I'm interested in this. That's usually converting to about 50 to 60 applicants that he's then weeding down to 18 that we take to our talent committee. And out of those 18, we do 18 interviews, and out of those 18, we pick the top 6, and that's been the pattern for 3 times now. So we have a compelling argument somewhere. Tim must have either that or he's kidnapping them. I'm not sure, but in all honesty, here's what I think it is. He's well tapped into the entrepreneurial landscape. So people who think like this, I think he's well tapped in. That helps too. Look, when you think about what we do in the studio, I get to be a fellow. You're going to pay me. We do pay a stipend. It's not a lot of money, but it's a little bit of money. So you're going to pay me while you also teach me about an industry I don't know much about, introduce me to the real people that are in it who are actually maybe willing to help me think about what the solution could be for a company that I could then become a founder of, where I own a portion of it. Okay, sign me up.
I'm not sure I should release this episode. You will be overflooded, I guess.
so I think there's a compelling value proposition. That's why I think we're doing really well there. And Tim's done a really nice job of being able to convey that value proposition to the marketplace. So that's that side. What about the company side?
Wait, before we move to the company side, what's the average age of this 18?
Well, the good news is it's all over the board. So we're apparently not age discriminatory, because we've got folks at all age groups. From we've had a couple in our program who've probably been in their mid-20s, early 20s to mid-20s. To we have one in this program who's probably in his he's probably 3 or 4 years younger than me, so right at 50, 48 to 50, right? So it goes all over. It goes all over the board with respect to that. There's a couple things I think are important to note about what we do here. It's not professors. We don't allow that, and it's not current students at Purdue. They could be a graduate. They could be somebody graduating from Purdue right now in May. We're doing our graduations here. They could be graduating in May, and they might start with us they potentially could start with us as a fellow in July. When we start our next one in July, they could theoretically do that. We've done that one time. We've had one student who that's in fact what happened was that after the graduation, they became a fellow. But we don't do students, and we don't do faculty. Why? Because it's a full-time job. This is the job. You're a fellow, you're a fellow full-time, all the time, all day long. And we expect you to perform well enough that you have a real chance to become a founder. So a professor doesn't get to come through it in 6 months and then go back to being a professor. That's not what we're trying to do here, right? So that's the two things it's not. Outside of that, we try to be as diverse as we can with respect to backgrounds, with respect to geography, and with respect to ethnicity. We're trying to be really diverse because we know that that's really critical to innovation. You've got to have a diverse set of people who think about things and think about problems in totally different ways, and we've been highly effective.
All right. So what about the business that comes to you?
Yeah. So why do the companies want to come to? Why do they want to spend time with us? Well, first of all, Marian, I'd say two things. We don't ask for a lot of time from any one individual company, right? And it's not a company; it's usually people in the company. That's all you're really interacting with. And if I'm asking a couple of people at CGB, Consolidated Grain and Barge, one of our key companies. If I'm asking two of them to spend 1 hour on a Zoom call with our fellows to help them learn more about the grain industry, they don't care about the return to that because it's not that high of a cost to them, right? So those are not so hard to do as long as you're not saying, well, we need a call every week for an hour. If we're doing that, we got to have some conversations about what are we doing to help you be involved later on. And then how do we get them to come to the industry roundtable? Because now you're traveling in, you're going to spend a day and a half, and what's the value associated with that? Well, it turns out, at least in our industry, and I think it's across a lot of industries, this is an opportunity to network with colleagues who are thinking about these innovations you don't get to spend very much time thinking about very often. But it's not really about me or about Purdue. It's about the fact that there's 65 of them that come together, and we happen to seed the conversation with these 12 ideas. But then they get to take those ideas and turn them into what they think they could be. They see that they have influence over that. The other thing that they've told me they see of real value is that we ask them at the end of the day to vote, which are the best 6. And they know we actually take those 6, and those are the ones we're moving forward, so they have real influence over what things are we going to be working on. I think that really matters to them. Now, for a small handful of them, 9 of these companies, they're our investors. And that's where the funds come from. That's where the smart money, I call it smart money, comes from. Each one of those companies is investing money into the studio process. And in the process of that, 1, they get more influence. But 2, they get to make and they have an investment. They own 30% of each one of these companies. So as those companies become successful, then the returns from that mean they get returns from it. Or, and for many of them, this is what they look to us for, that company gets created by the studio, and then in follow-on rounds, that's an interesting company to their company. They're like, hey, I'm going to invest even more in this company because I think it's important for us. So they get that deal flow, if you will, that's important to them because they get to see amongst these 12 companies we'll be creating here. Hey, that's one I want to invest further in. So those are the benefits that come to the industry.
So it looks like it's good combination, good connection all the way through, because the business gets essentially their problem solved for them. The talent that you're bringing is it's interesting that you mentioned that most of your talent is coming from outside of food and agri, if I understand correctly, because that brings the diversity of knowledge, right? Exactly, and filling the knowledge gaps that you require. And you mentioned tech, you mentioned kind of other business knowledge. So if people wanted to find out more about DIAL and about the opportunities, and we can't stop the flood, so let's get it out there. If people wanted to become fellows, where can they find more information?
Yeah, so we're pretty simple. DIALVentures.com. Anything you want to know about the basics of what we do in DIAL is at DIALVentures.com. Certainly, they can follow DIAL Ventures on Twitter, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably our most important social media account. We do a lot of posting there on LinkedIn about what we're doing in each one of our cycles as we go along in LinkedIn. Certainly, they can reach out to me. I'm very easy to find because my email is Gray, Gray, at Purdue.edu. Marian, that's age related, by the way. If it's your last name at your institution, that's how long you've been there. The answer is yes. I've been at Purdue so long, they don't need to add my first name. They don't need to add numbers to the end of it. I am the original Gray at Purdue.edu, which is why my hair looks as gray as it does, because I've been here a long time, right?
But funnily enough, my surname is translated to Gray with the first thing. And the second one, if we want to play like that, I have an email, private email, which is my surname.gmail.com.
There you go. You were there when Gmail was first created.
Almost, yes. It was invitation only back then.
Invitation only back then. Yeah. So those are the ways. Those are the easy ways to reach us. And then once you get to those spaces and you're interested more, follow up with me or follow up with Tim or Jared Sutton, who's our other director. He's the director of industry and business development. And we're easy to find on DIALVentures.com.
Obviously, we'll link all that in the description to the episode. And it looks like there's you've got the pipeline set up. So let's hope that these 3 cycles that you've kind of 2 that you've managed to, if I understand correctly, to complete, and now that you're running the 3rd one. Let's hope they all develop into real innovation and digitization of the food and agri chain, so that we can have a more sustainable, even more sustainable future. 40 growing to 140 to 340 or whatever. And as always, let's hope it was of use to someone.
Thank you for listening.
Also, don't miss the next one, where we'll talk to Ken Ponder, Chief Information Officer at Viscous Companies, about myths around IT capabilities, rules of cooperation between IT and business, and about successful change management.
Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or visit bdr.show to find out more about future episodes and guests. You can also check out Cognition.llc for more information on Cognition Shared Solutions, our services, and other events hosted by us.
For now, it's thank you from myself, Artur Guya, and my co-host, your friendly neighborhood data guy, Dr. Marian Sidak.
Thank you, and goodbye.